A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Imagine a commute that takes 90 minutes before you even reach your desk. And I am not talking about sitting in traffic on the 405 or dealing with a delayed train. I am talking about a vertical drop into the crust of the planet, where the rock walls around you are sitting at 66 degrees Celsius.
That is 151 degrees Fahrenheit for our friends using that scale. It is a temperature that would quite literally cook a human being in short order if the engineering failed for even a few hours. It is not just hot, it is lethal.
Today's prompt from Daniel is about the Mponeng Gold Mine in South Africa. It is the deepest man-made excavation on Earth, reaching down 4 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that is roughly twice the depth of the Grand Canyon. Daniel wants us to look at what it is actually like to work and live in that environment, especially with the shifting economics we are seeing here in March 26.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have to say, Mponeng. And that is pronounced with a soft hum on the mempo. Ning is the ultimate test of human ingenuity versus the sheer weight of the planet. We are talking about the Witwatersrand Basin, Vu Vat-Ersrand, in the Gauteng province. The geology there is unique because the gold is concentrated in these incredibly thin tabular reefs that tilt downward. To get to the high-grade stuff, you have to follow it into the depths where the physics of the Earth start to become very unfriendly.
You have been itching to talk about the thermodynamics of this, haven't you? Because when I hear 4 kilometers deep, my first thought is not the gold, it is the heat. How do you keep 5,000 people from essentially boiling alive while they work?
It is a massive thermodynamic puzzle, corn. At those depths, you are dealing with virgin rock temperatures of 66 degrees because of the geothermal gradient. For every kilometer you go down, the temperature rises significantly. The mine has to pump 6,000 tons of ice slurry underground every single day. They have these enormous refrigeration plants on the surface that create this slush, and it is sent down in vacuum-insulated pipes to cooling towers at various levels.
6,000 tons of ice a day. That is a number that is hard to wrap your head around. We actually talked about some of the high-tech cooling systems in episode 507, specifically how ancient wisdom and modern tech collide. But Mponeng is on a whole different scale. It is not just about comfort, it is about life support. If those pumps stop, the clock starts ticking. What does that actually feel like for a miner on the ground? Or, I guess, under the ground?
Even with that massive cooling effort, the ambient air temperature stays around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius with 95% humidity. Think about that. It is like working in a permanent, high-pressure sauna, where you are also performing intense physical labor. The air is pushed through the mine by giant fans, and as it travels through the tunnels, it picks up heat from the rock almost instantly. You are constantly drenched in sweat, but the sweat cannot evaporate because the humidity is so high. Your body loses its ability to cool itself.
And that is just the temperature. We haven't even touched on the pressure yet. When you are 4 kilometers down, you have a literal mountain sitting on top of you.
The pressure is the other silent killer. At 4 kilometers, the weight of the rock above you is trying to close that hole with millions of tons of force. This leads to what they call rockbursts. It is not like a slow cave-in you see in movies where a few pebbles fall and then the roof sags. A rockburst is a spontaneous, violent explosion of the rock walls. The internal stress just becomes too much for the crystalline structure to hold, and the rock shatters outward like a grenade.
That sounds terrifying. I read that they use something called sequential grid mining to try to manage that stress. Is that just a fancy way of saying they dig in a specific order to keep the roof from falling in?
It is a bit more sophisticated than that. They leave pillars of unmined rock in a very specific pattern to act as natural supports, and they also use backfilling, where they pump waste material back into the mined out areas to provide resistance. but the real frontline defense is what you see on the walls of every tunnel. They use shotcrete, which is a specialized spray-on concrete, and then they overlay that with heavy-duty diamond mesh netting and long steel bolts that are driven meters into the rock to stitch the layers together.
So you are basically sewing the mountain together as you go. It is wild to think about the contrast between that raw, heavy engineering and the high-tech shift we are seeing now. Daniel mentioned that as of March 26, they are integrating AI-driven geotechnical monitoring. I assume that is to give them a bit more warning before one of these rock bursts happens.
The seismic monitoring is incredible now. They have sensors throughout the mine that pick up microfractures in the rock that are far too small for a human to hear or feel. The AI analyzes those patterns in real time to predict where the stress is building up. It gives the teams a chance to evacuate an area before the rock fails. It is a huge leap from the old days where you just listened for the creaking of the timbers and hoped for the best. But even with AI, the risk is never zero. You are working in a dynamic environment where the Earth is constantly trying to reclaim the space you have carved out.
It is interesting because, while the tech is getting more advanced, the physical reality of the mine is still very traditional in some ways. You mentioned the commute at the start, 90 minutes just to get to the face. That is a lot of lost productivity every day, but it is also a psychological burden.
The descent is a multi-stage process. You start in the cage, which is this massive steel elevator. The first leg drops you about 1.6 miles down at 40 miles per hour. Your ears are popping constantly because of the pressure change. Then you have to get out, walk to a different shaft, and take another elevator even deeper. By the time you reach the carbon leader reef, you have traveled 4 kilometers vertically and potentially several more kilometers horizontally. You are in a different world.
And once you are there, you are not exactly in a spacious cavern. From what I understand, these gold reefs are sometimes only 30 centimeters thick.
This is why full automation is so difficult at Mponeng. In some of those stopes, the miners are working in spaces less than a meter high. You cannot just drive a massive robotic boring machine into a space that small. You still need human beings who can crawl into those narrow gaps, drill holes for explosives, and clear the rock. It is one of the most physically demanding jobs on the planet. You are essentially working in a crawl space that is also a furnace.
Which brings us to the economics of it all. Harmony Gold just announced that interim dividend of 3.4 billion rand on March 11th. That is a massive payout, especially considering their production actually dipped 9%. It seems like they are riding the wave of high gold prices to fund a pretty radical transition.
Byers Nell, the CEO, has been very clear about this. He is a mining engineer by trade, so he understands the technical debt of deep-level mining. They are using the cash from Mponeng to pivot toward copper mining in Australia and Papua New Guinea. Copper is the green metal of the future, essential for electric vehicles and power grids. But Mponeng is still the engine room. It is the flagship asset that makes everything else possible. They are using the gold of the past to fund the copper of the future.
But that engine room is getting more expensive to run. We saw that market correction on March 20th where billions were wiped off mining stocks. When the price of gold flinches, a mine like Mponeng feels it more than a surface mine in Nevada, because their margins are constantly being eaten by the cost of electricity for those cooling plants and the massive labor force.
There is also the decarbonization pressure. You cannot run 6,000 tons of ice slurry and massive ventilation fans on a prayer. It takes an enormous amount of power. Harmony is trying to get 1/3 of their operations onto renewable energy by the end of this year, 26. They are building massive solar and wind farms to try to offset that cost and the carbon footprint. It is a bit of a paradox, though. You are using green energy to dig deep into the earth for a metal that is essentially a store of value.
Well, gold isn't just a store of value anymore, though it is a big part of it. We talked about physical gold in episode 1443, but the industrial demand for high reliability electronics also keeps it relevant. The real question for me is the human side. You have 5,000 people descending into this high-pressure sauna every day. There has to be a point where the risk and the cost outweigh the reward.
That is what the Mponeng Extension Project is trying to answer. They are investing 7.9 billion rand to extend the life of the mine out to 2045. They are betting that the carbon leader reef is rich enough to justify going even deeper and staying there for another 2 decades. Floyd Masemula, the deputy CEO, has the unenviable job of managing that complexity. You have to balance the National Union of Mine Workers who want job security against the reality that the deeper you go, the more you need to automate just to keep people safe.
It is a delicate balance. If you automate too much, you lose the support of the community and the unions. If you automate too little, the safety risks become unacceptable and the costs spiral. It is a bit like the isolation we talked about in the Antarctica episode, 1250. You are in this extreme environment where you are totally dependent on the life support systems, but you are there to do a job that the world demands.
The difference is that in Antarctica you are mostly doing science. At Mponeng you are part of a massive industrial machine. Every day they pull out 5,400 tons of rock just to get a relatively small amount of gold. The sheer scale of the waste versus the product is mind-boggling. You are moving mountains just to get a few handfuls of yellow metal, and remember, that rock has to be hauled 4 kilometers up. The energy required just for the hoisting is astronomical.
And yet, in a world of digital currency and fluctuating markets, that physical anchor still matters. But I look at that 3.4 billion rand dividend, and I wonder how much of that is a last hurrah for the deep level model. If Harmony is pivoting to copper, they might be seeing the writing on the wall for ultra deep gold.
I think it is more about diversification. Gold is a hedge, but copper is a growth play. By using Mponeng as a cash cow, they are bridging the gap between the old world of mining and the new one. But don't count Mponeng out. The engineering that goes into keeping that place running is some of the most advanced in the world. They are essentially operating a space station, just in the opposite direction. If they can solve the problems at 4 kilometers, they are setting the stage for the next generation of resource extraction.
A space station with 95% humidity and the constant threat of the walls exploding. I think I will stick to my desk job, thanks. But it really does make you appreciate the human cost of the things we take for granted. Every gold ring or component in a smartphone likely has a bit of that 4-kilometer deep sweat in it.
It really does. And the technical takeaways here are pretty clear. If you are looking at the future of resource extraction, it is going to be defined by two things, thermodynamics and AI. The ability to manage heat is the hard ceiling on how deep we can go, and the AI is the only way we can navigate the seismic risks of those depths. We are reaching the limits of what the human body can endure, which means the next phase of Mponeng will have to be even more tech-heavy.
For our listeners who are interested in the engineering side, I would definitely keep an eye on Harmony Gold's renewable energy milestones toward the end of 26. If they can actually hit that 1/3 target while operating the deepest mine on Earth, it will be a massive proof of concept for the entire industry. It would show that even the most energy-intensive industries can pivot.
It will also be interesting to see if the Mponeng extension project hits its targets. They are looking to access the carbon leader reef at levels we have never sustained before. It is a multi-billion rand bet on the future of the South African mining sector, which has been under a lot of pressure lately from both economic and social factors.
So, what do we actually take away from this? I think the first thing is that mining is no longer just about digging a hole. It is about environmental management on a scale that is almost hard to comprehend. When you are talking about 6,000 tons of ice a day, you are talking about terraforming a small part of the Earth's crust just to make it habitable for humans.
The second thing is the deep level premium. We often talk about the price of gold as a ticker on a screen, but the physical reality of extracting it from 4 kilometers down involves a massive energy and human cost that surface mining simply doesn't have. As the easy-to-reach gold disappears, the world is going to have to decide how much it is willing to pay for the stuff that is buried at the bottom of the world. The price of gold isn't just about supply and demand, it is about the cost of fighting physics.
And the third thing is the role of AI in safety. We hear a lot of doom and gloom about AI taking jobs, but in the context of Mponeng, it is literally the thing that might keep those 5,000 miners safe. Using seismic data to predict rockbursts is a perfect example of AI doing something a human simply cannot do. It is not replacing the miner, it is giving the miner a shield.
It is the ultimate collaboration, human intuition and physical skill at the rock face, supported by massive cooling infrastructure and real-time AI monitoring. It is a brutal environment, But it is also a testament to what we can do when the incentives are high enough. We are literally pushing the boundaries of where life can exist on this planet.
It makes you wonder if we will eventually see the same technology used for other things. If we can mine at 4 kilometers, can we eventually build other types of infrastructure down there? Data centers, maybe? Or is the heat always going to be the final boss?
The heat is a formidable opponent, but as we saw in the cooling tech episode, we are getting better at managing it. The question is always going to be the energy cost. Is it worth the megawatts to keep a space cool 4 kilometers down? For gold, the answer is currently yes. For anything else, probably not yet. But as energy costs change with renewables, who knows?
Well, it is a fascinating look at a world most of us will never see. I am perfectly happy staying at sea level with a reasonable commute and rock walls that stay exactly where they are supposed to be. I don't need my office to be a thermodynamic puzzle.
I don't know, Corn. I think you would look good in a hard hat and a cooling vest. You could be the most thoughtful sloth in the stope. You could provide philosophical commentary while they drill.
I think I will pass. I prefer my saunas to be optional and my elevators to not drop at 40 miles per hour, but I have a lot more respect for the people who do make that trip every day. It is an endurance test that most of us wouldn't last an hour in. The sheer grit required to do that shift after shift is incredible.
Truly. And it is a reminder that even in 2026, with all our digital advancements, we are still a civilization built on the raw materials we can pull out of the ground. Whether it is gold from Mponeng or copper from Australia, the physical world still dictates the terms of our existence. We are still a species that digs.
That is a good place to wrap this one up. It is a deep topic, literally and figuratively. Before we go, we should probably think about what this means for the next decade. If Mponeng is successful in its extension, it might be the blueprint for how we access the even deeper resources that we know are down there. Or it might be the last of its kind.
As we move toward a more circular economy and better recycling of metals, the need for these extreme deep-level mines might fade. But for now, Mponeng stands as the deepest point of human reach into our own planet. It is our version of the Mariana Trench, but with gold and ice slurry.
Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flemingtop for keeping the show running smoothly. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the AI behind my weird prompts.
If you found this dive into the depths interesting, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. It really does help other people find the show. And if you have a prompt about extreme engineering or the future of mining, send it our way.
You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for our full archive and RSS feed. We have over 1,400 episodes covering everything from Antarctic survival to the science of cooling, so there is plenty to explore.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Thanks for listening.
Catch you in the next one. Stay cool.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth